Welcome to the Staff Hearing Officer meeting of December 14th, 2022. My name is Ellen Kokinda. I'm going to start it up and open up preliminary matters for requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items. I have none. Any announcements and appeals? No announcements or appeals today. And now I'm going to open up public comment for items not on today's agenda. So if anyone in the audience or attending via Zoom wishes to speak on items not on today's agenda, please raise your hand in Zoom, and it will indicate. And again, if you wish to speak on items not on today's agenda, you can come up to the podium now. And Jillian, did we receive any public comment or any raised hands?
Thank you. We did not receive any general public comment speaker slip or remote public commenters.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close general public comment. And we can start, we'll open up the item A. This is 1260 Ferrelo Road. This is a project located on a 6,544 square foot lot in the Hillside Design District, and it's currently developed with a 1,511 net square foot single unit residence and attached 476 net square foot attached garage. The project proposes an 87 net square foot bedroom addition, a 36 net square foot bathroom addition, interior remodel, including relocation of the bathroom, a new laundry room, expansion of an existing deck at the front of the site, a new trellis on the deck, a new roof covering windows, doors, and exterior colors. The applications, the discretionary applications under the staff hearing officer review or for a front setback modification to allow an addition to the house and expansion of a deck to encroach into the required 25-foot setback from Ferrelo Road, and then an open yard modification to allow a reduction of the non-conforming open yard to accommodate an addition to the house. And then further, part of the review is determine that the project is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to the CEQA section 15301 existing facilities. Today we have Mr. Bowman here to walk us through the project, and then we'll be able to invite the applicant up. Do you mind switching over? Good morning. Right. Good to see you.
Morning. Thanks, Ms. Kokinda.
And if I could ask, do you mind clicking on that little arrow so the sidebar collapses? Sorry, I thought I did that. It must have. There we go. That better viewing. All Perfect.
Right. Thanks for the project description. This is a view of the vicinity. Ferrelo Road runs along here, and it's sloping down toward the south. So this row of houses is on the uphill side of the street. You can see the subject site outlined in yellow. Let me go to the plans. Here's the existing site plan. It's a one-story single-family house. The project proposes a remodel, interior and exterior remodel, with small additions on the front of the house. So that's the existing site plan. And here's the proposed site plan. I'll zoom in a little closer. This brown area indicates where the slope of the front part of the lot was calculated. This zone, the RS15 zone normally has a 30-foot front setback, but due to the steep slope of the front part of the lot, the setback is 25 feet. So we're talking about a modification of the 25-foot front setback. I'll zoom in a little closer. And this is a proposed bedroom addition, and this L shape is a proposed bathroom addition. The project proposes expanding a front deck also and a trellis, which would be outside the required setbacks. It's also, like I said, an exterior remodel, new finishes on the outside, new roof, new windows and doors. But getting right to the requested modifications and staff support, well, I should go back and explain the site is non-conforming to open yard. We've got all this building for the house, and then the driveway comes in here and turns into the attached two-car garage, and then we've got the maneuverability and back-out space for the driveway. So driveway is not allowed to be included in open yard, and the building isn't, so that doesn't leave very much open yard. So we have exhibits here that show the non-conforming open yard situation. So the point being, this bit of a addition reduces the open yard further below its already non-conforming amount, so that needs an open yard modification. But back to the front setback, staff's indicated that we don't support the requested front set modification for this addition. It's a small addition, 80-some square feet, but it presents a relatively large protrusion into the front setback. Conforming options are available for additions outside the front setback, and that other area in front of the house could be a potential. Also, a second-story addition's allowed here. We do realize, and we've heard from neighbors, I know they're very sensitive to second-story additions, but a second-story addition could be a conforming option. The location chosen for the addition is driven by the floor plan. It's a reasonable desire by the owner to maintain the living room and dining room while expanding the bedroom and bathroom. From the interior floor plan perspective, it makes sense. But staff has looked at this request for a modification just from the bigger picture, community perspective. I'll go back to just the pattern of development here, and also this exhibit might show more clearly. There's not necessarily a clear pattern. There's really not a pattern. This addition would come out an additional 7.5 feet here. So it doesn't really, it wouldn't be following a pattern of development. It would kind of be more of an encroachment than is common on that uphill side of the street. The downhill side of the street's a different matter. It's kind of apples and oranges, where you have development much closer, typically to accommodate garages on the downhill side. There don't appear to be physical characteristics of the site or the development or other unusual circumstances that would justify a front setback encroachment here. But having said that, this is a very conservative opinion by staff. Staff's not the review authority, so we tend to err on the side of a conservative recommendation for modifications. The SFDB saw it, and they said the setback encroachment would be consistent with their guidelines. So maybe that's enough said. If the SFDB thinks it's compatible and fits into the neighborhood, maybe that's reason to approve the mod. So the other, let's see, going back to the plans, the deck expansion is also, because it's elevated above grade quite a bit, it requires a setback modification to encroach into the setback as it's shown here. And staff believes that is an appropriate improvement, because otherwise, without the deck area, the slope is pretty steep, so the deck provides a nice outdoor living space. The backyards, the back behind the house is pretty sloped and very small, and this is a nice area of the site with the views. So staff doesn't find that that's a problem, and it doesn't present building mass out in the front setback like the addition does. When the SFDB saw this, they had some concerns about the existing trees, that they be protected, and requested that the deck be reduced. Whether or not and the applicants proposed an 18-inch reduction from what the SFDB saw, but it hasn't gone back to the SFDB, so we don't know for sure if they would find that acceptable. So staff recommends that the front setback modification for the deck be approved, but to include a condition of approval to allow the SFDB some flexibility when it does return to them, if they would like to see a further reduction. It would still be a setback encroachment, but to let the SFDB have the final say if they feel like it needs to be reduced further, since they haven't seen it. And as I described a minute ago, the open yard situation, staff can support an open yard modification, mainly because of the way the driveway and the house consumes a lot of space on the site. It's already non-conforming. And particularly with regard to a conforming addition that's outside the setbacks, staff would support that reduction of open yard for that. I think that covers what I wanted to say. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you. I'll save questions for after the applicant's presentation and public comment. So if I'd like to invite the applicant team up, if you could just introduce yourselves and make sure to speak into the microphones. And you just turn them on at the base. It says push.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brooke Van Dyne, representing Sherry and Associates Architects. We are the agent and applicant for the owners at 1260 Ferrelo. I do have a quick question before I get started. I see the plans and things that Mr. Bowman brought up, but does that also include the site photos that I had submitted?
Yeah. If you click on that PDF symbol down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see
Site photos, applicant photos.
there's applicant photos. The aerial view that I just showed was the staff photos, so there's a set in there that says applicant.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm sorry, this is nitpicky. Do you mind just hitting, or never mind, you got it. Or if you go back to the photos, if you could hit that arrow on the side and collapse that.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to address some of the comments that Mr. Bowman spoke about, and I will also address a few other comments for our project. So regarding the open yard, we currently have the non-conforming open yard that Mr. Bowman explained, and we're only asking for a reduction of about 38 square feet in open yard. Mr. Bowman had mentioned that the addition to the master bedroom on the front of the house right here, he said that there were alternatives to build on both to the living room and dining room area, which are here where I have my cursor. If we were to add an addition there, we would further be encroaching into that open yard, and we're trying to limit and minimize the encroachment into the open yard because it's such a non-conforming minimal open yard area anyway. So the reason for not creating an addition where the trellis will be located, that's the reason for not encroaching further into that area. As Mr. Bowman said, we did remove 18 inches from the front of the deck per the SFDB comments that we received. And then I want to address the front setback modification. The proposed master bedroom is currently a legal non-conforming. Let me just want to zoom in here, because you can see the existing residence is in the front and side yard setbacks already. And as Mr. Bowman mentioned, we're only building out from this front wall of the house 7 feet 8 inches, which is a minimal addition comparatively speaking. And the proposed addition is compatible with the design aesthetics of the existing house and the surrounding neighborhood. On October 31st, we presented the case to SFDB, and the board found that the addition was aesthetically appropriate to the site and surrounding neighborhood. And another item that I wanted to address is where this house is located in relation to the road. And this has not yet been addressed. Ferrelo Road, the finished floor of the house is approximately 13 feet above street level. So it is not visible to passersby in vehicles. The Riviera doesn't get much through traffic anyhow. So this isn't something that is easily seen from the street. And our argument is that there is, in fact, the presence of lot constraints that cause a hardship on the property and its owners. The existing master bedroom is only about 11 feet by 16 feet, which is just barely enough for basic bedroom furniture. And the addition to the bedroom would provide just enough for a more usable and more livable area in the master bedroom. It's a very small house, only about 1,500 square feet. There is nowhere on the property that was a feasible location for an addition, as Mr. Bowman, oh, the toolbar went away. I don't know how to get that back. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. My apologies.
Kind of throw you in, figure it out.
Yeah. It's always different using a new computer than what you're used to. So I want to go to the proposed site. As Mr. Rowan said, this lot is almost fully developed. It's a very small house on an awkward-sized lot. There's nowhere at the rear of the property that we could have added one because of the two-car garage. We couldn't build out to the side because of interior setbacks and because of the location of the driveway. Then there's the turnaround area. So this was really the only feasible area to provide an addition. If there had been someplace else for an addition, we would have pursued it. We had initially considered a two-story addition to the house. The owners had talked to neighbors next door and on the surrounding properties that would have been directly affected by a second-story addition, and it would have blocked views. It would have been very obstructive, and so in the spirit of compromise, the owners at 1260 Ferrelo decided not to pursue the second-story addition, and they settled just for the small addition to the front of the house. The owners are a husband and wife. They both work from home, and they have a need for a private area to conduct business instead of just trying to work in the communal living room and dining area where family and children are present during business hours. Like I said, such an area does not exist on this property, and so that's just another reason that this addition to the master bedroom is important, not only to their comfort, but to their livelihoods. The staff members are supportive of the new deck because it provides a usable area outdoors for the residents, and we feel that this addition has the same benefits to the residents by providing a suitable living area for people who work from home inside the residence. And another point that I wanted to make was that in 2001, a modification was approved to the house that is 3 doors down. This was for a new garage to be located within the 30-foot front yard setback and a 10-foot interior setback, and also for an addition to the residence within the 30-foot setback for a new entry to that residence. That was in 2001, and the setback requirements were the same. In 2012, another modification was approved for an addition for a residential entryway within the 30-foot setback. So there is a precedence that has already been set for additions within that setback, and that is conforming with the neighborhood. I believe I saw Mr. Bowman. Okay, so this house right here where I have my cursor, that is where one of the modifications had occurred, and then the other one was this house just a little bit further. They're both on the same side of the street, same side on the mountainside. So as I mentioned, it's a very small house, and it's a very small lot with a very steep sloping front yard. And we're asking that the owners be allowed this 87 square foot addition to their master bedroom that would provide a much needed suitable living space that meets their needs. And taking all this information into consideration, we would like to ask the staff hearing officer to find in support of that front yard setback modification. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to open it up to public comment. I'm just, for anyone joining us via Zoom, if you wish to comment on 1260 Ferrelo Road, please raise your hand by following the instructions on the key or on the screen. And I think I understand we have some public speakers here. Well, if you want to call them out.
Thank you.
So we have Jillian will call up the public speakers. If you could just turn on the mic by pressing the button and just be sure to speak into the microphone, and please state your name for the record if you wish. And then you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And do we have anybody joining us by Zoom?
Thank you. We do not have anyone joining us by Zoom, so we can start with the in-person comments. We'll start with Becky Nocht and then go to Marty Collins.
I'm Becky Kneck. I live at 16 Rubio, which sits directly behind the house. For us, if they need to increase the size, this is the best option because their garage sits right, probably 6 feet from our property line. So if they go up there, it blocks not only our view, but our neighbor next to us. I have asked around the neighborhood, and everybody seems to be on board with this. Because we all kind of hang out together, walk together. So I just want to say that I think they've done a nice job so far, and we're totally in support.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll have Marty Collins and then Jim Brickenmar.
Hi, I'm Marty. I'm the house owner. It's a little weird to have everybody talk about your house. We love living in the neighborhood. We just moved in, and the only way for the house to work for both my husband and I to work at home is to have some sort of addition. This would be my office. And what you can't see in the pictures is the house sits very high from the street. And so you don't actually see much of the house at all from the street. And so we don't see it as changing the elements of the neighborhood at all, but we definitely talked to our neighbor just to the north. Unfortunately, the first owner passed away, and then it was left to his family. So we've spoken to his family, and they're in complete agreement of this small addition, because as my neighbor just spoke, we talked about doing an addition on the second floor, and it was not agreeable by the neighborhood. There is a house just across the street from us, 1269, that is in the process of the same process review. It is a much more extensive remodel. They're trying to do a second floor. They're bringing that setback out to the street, and has not sat well with the neighborhood, does not look like what the neighbors normally look like, and that is not an option that we would have ever considered. We just need this extra space to make the house more livable. It's actually a beautiful house, and it has a great view. We love the neighborhood. We've done a lot of work on the front of the house to restore the landscape. So we spent about $10,000 just making sure that the landscape looks nice to the neighborhood because it was overgrown. We bought it from a woman that passed away in the house after living there over 50 years. And so we really just want to bring the beauty of the house back. And this would allow us to live in it more comfortably while we restore it to really, fit in with the neighborhood. Everything we're doing is completely aesthetically connected to what the neighbors look like. Almost all the houses are single story. They're not two-story houses. So I'm not sure how that would even be a consideration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Next speaker.
Thank you. We'll have Jim Brinkman, and then we'll have Emma Brinkman.
Brief. the concerns that I had were actually addressed by Mr. Bauman's presentation. So,
Okay, great. Do you wish to share what they were, just so I understand what the?
no, it was the differential between setbacks on the southerly side of Ferrelo Road and those on the northerly side.
Got it, with
And he said it
the
was
slope count.
associated with slope. So that's
exactly.
That did
Thank-
address it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Pardon me. Go ahead.
I'm Emma Brinkman, and I live across the street from the project at 1261 Ferrelo Road. And I just want to kind of clarify something that was a little puzzling to me. If you look at those two exhibits I brought you, you can see that the setback is measured from the street. However, if you look at the front yard, you can see there's a stake there. So when we had our lot surveyed, they said that the public right-of-way was at that stake. So my confusion here is the setback measured from the street, or is it measured from the property line at the stake? There's about 11.5-foot difference here. So is the public right-of-way part of the 25-foot setback? I don't know. I would like to have that clarified, just because we have a lot of development currently in the neighborhood, and it's just for my edification. Personally, I think their project fits in well as far as the extension out towards our visibility across the street. There's plenty of screening with the trees, but that's confusing to me. And as you can see from that one lot map, you can see that they've taken it all the way to the wall, which you can see in the other photograph, and where the water meters are. So it's obviously to the street. So maybe the applicant can kind of explain that, where they're measuring the setback from.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, now if I can invite the applicant team back up, and then Mr. Baumann, if you don't mind joining as well. And we still don't have anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak.
Thank you. We do not have any further public comments.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment for this item. And then just ask a couple of questions. Mr. Baumann, this is just to address and for clarification on how we look at lot lines. Can you please explain where we measure, how we measure setbacks, and it's all based on the code and kind of how it's drafted. If you could explain that for the public commenter.
Well, generally, a front lot line is the line that separates the private property from the public right-of-way. Sometimes public right-of-ways extend over the top and overlap with the private property. So when the public right-of-way overlays or overlaps onto the private property, the setback is taken from the right-of-way line, which would be on the private property. But in this case, the right-of-way line the front lot line divides the public from the private property. So the setback's measured from the right-of-way line.
Okay.
And it was shown on the aerial view where I had the property outlined in yellow.
There we go.
If you can go up one page there. Yeah, there you go. And like the public commenter mentioned, you can see that right-of-way extends beyond the paving of the street. That's another thing I should have mentioned. The right-of-way doesn't always match up with the paving. Often the right-of-way, like it is here, is wider than the actual street paving. So it's up there into the landscaping where the
Great.
front lot line is.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, clarifies that. Moving on, so I do just want to comment that I read the staff report and the single-family design board review, and I went out for a site visit. So what you see on plans is, you can get so much information, but it's always illuminating when you go out to the site. And certainly noticing a couple of things, just initial comments. That back area, despite, if you look at just the 2D plans, it shows open yard being behind the proposed JADU and kind of behind the parking area, it's really not usable space. It's really tight. The slope is so extreme there. So it was just one of my observations there. Just also an interesting observation. I am very familiar with this street. There are lots of projects, lots of development and different things. So I've actually been on a number of site visits just within this vicinity. So I'm quite familiar with the street in general. I guess a question that I want to start up. Can you point out in your photos the tree, the existing tree that's in front of the deck in the front yard? Just curious.
And these pictures were taken before the landscaping that she had talked about, because you were just out there recently. So you can see that all this overgrown area, all of that has been removed. This tree right there, that is remaining, and then there is a larger, I mean, you can see how overgrown it was initially. So this is just, the top of the landscaping, but there's an oak tree just above where the fire hydrant is that we're not proposing the removal of any trees. We had the city engineer out from the transportation department to review it. It meets all of the requirements for visibility, but that tree right there was what the SFDB was initially concerned with, and that's why they asked it just to move it back 18 inches. There is an existing deck there. I can show you on the plans. That there, bear with me, I apologize. So, and this shaded portion right here is that existing deck. And so we're not proposing any changes to any of the trees there, and it won't affect the development.
Another question, I was curious again, after going out and kind of realizing the existing conditions in the rear and how you've marked that as part of the designated open yard, even though it doesn't necessarily mean, it's non-conforming. We acknowledge that it's non-conforming open yard, but you're trying to find patches that might kind of contribute to, the purpose of open yard is, being able to have a space to enjoy for quality of life, to have light or, air, kind of open space. Are you, with understanding that there's limitations just where the driveway is located and the turnaround area, are you proposing any improvements to that back area? I mean, I see that there's a basketball goal or, a basketball hoop out there.
The garage is being converted to a new JADU, so it will be improved just in the fact that it's going to be a nice residential unit that will match the remodel of the house with the new exterior finish, new doors and windows. We are retaining a parking space in that back area so that we can retain the driveway and turnaround area. But in terms of landscaping, there's no proposed alterations back there because, like you said, it's not a livable area. It's not really even a usable area for outdoor open yard area. We had indicated that on our plans at the recommendation of city staff that they wanted us to include that area in the open yard calculations in addition to what's actually in the front yard. And because with this property, the front yard is actually the backyard. There, and I can show you here on the proposed floor plans, this is the front entrance to the house. It's actually on the back side. So what is technically their front yard is actually the backyard living area for the residents. Therefore, that's why they wanted the deck in that area, and that's the area that they're focusing their improvements on, is because that's what's going to be usable.
Okay. Thank you so much. Those are all my questions. So I do have comments. Again, this is a highly constrained lot, given the driveway configuration, the turnaround area, the fact that you've got an extremely sloped lot. Actually, can we go back to the site plan? Sorry, that helps me visualize. Very steeped lot in the front, and the fact that this is a fairly modest-sized home, and I think that what the applicant owner, what you're requesting is, I appreciate the fact that you are not proposing a second-story element. I think that's a courtesy to your neighbors, and if you look at the rest of the neighborhood, at least on the mountain side, most of the homes are, or many of the homes are one story. I appreciate staff's comments, but I disagree with the conservative approach because this street is so unique and based on the geography and the topography that many of the homes are kind of nestled in and they're kind of positioned, they're oriented in different ways as you come down Ferrelo Road, or, if you're up on Rubio and then you're coming down. So I think each one is trying to work with the existing landscape, and I think that this particular proposal is modest. You all could have proposed a conforming second story, but I think, again, by choosing to request a modification for the addition, I think it's actually a benefit because, again, it's not necessarily imposing on anyone else's. It's a courtesy. Again, you could have done that to the chagrin of your neighbors. So I certainly appreciate that. I also think that the proposal is modest. Yes, you could have shifted that mass over to further to the right where the proposed deck is, but if just understanding the floor plan and being able to achieve a suitable open yard experience, and again, to kind of hit on the purpose of what an open yard is, it makes the most sense to use that area further to the left where the addition is proposed, albeit that it is within the front setback. And just because, again, it's a foundation that's almost, there is room to grow a little bit. I don't think it's affecting the pattern of development throughout the neighborhood. And again, if you move one house over, even with that bump out, it's still it's close to the two doors down. So again, with the positioning, with the street curvature, I think it's, and just again, looking at your design alternatives, that's something that we, as the staff hearing officer, I'm looking for, like, what other considerations did you make? So I feel like, again, it's a very sensible plan. I'm also supportive of the open yard modification. And as Ms. Van Doyen pointed out, that you're trying to utilize and improve the space that you already have, and the front yard is really kind of where all the action is. It's kind of the orientation without having to mess too much with the rest of the home and the layout. But clearly that's going to capture, that's going to be where you live. And I think even having that addition creates a little bit more of a buffer and privacy and experience for you. So I hope that, I think that I trust SFDB. That's, the Single Family Design Board has a different purview than I do. I'm looking at these modifications and the environmental review. And I trust that they will be able to manage the design and look at the kind of nuances and details of that. But I'm going to go ahead and I can make the findings for the front setback modification for both the deck and the addition. Again, just acknowledging that this is an appropriate improvement on the lot, that you all have managed to find a design that is just maintains a one-story element, that this is a highly constrained lot, given the location of the driveway and turnaround and needing to be able to maintain that. And as far as just using the existing area in a modest way, so that, again, you could create more elements to have a little bit more privacy for that open yard. And the fact that this site is so sloped and the fact that it is so heavily landscaped, it actually provides a buffer to some of those downhill neighbors. So really the visual impact is more as you're going up Ferrelo Road. And it would just be a small element, but based on the patterns of the neighborhood, it wouldn't catch you off guard because of, again, each home around Ferrelo is positioned in a way to utilize the topography, and I believe that this particular project does the same. So that's approving the front setback modification for the deck and the addition, and then I also approve the open yard modification. I think it's necessary to secure the appropriate improvement on the lot. Again, this is already a non-conforming to open yard, and although that back area is designated as non-conforming open yard, I think you're really capturing it up front and creating a lovely space that will be able to achieve the purpose of enjoying outdoor area. And really, there's just not many other alternatives on the site other than to kind of capture that. So that is my decision, and I also, as part of that, accept the determination for the environmental review that staff wrote in. And I am not adding any conditions to that approval, but if anybody so wishes, my decision may be appealed within 10 calendar days to City Council, and also within that 10 calendar day time period, the Planning Commission, any member of the Planning Commission could pull my decision if they so wish. So thank you so much for your great presentation, and that's both to staff and the applicant. I really appreciate the thoughts and the comments that went into it, and yeah, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cookin.
Yeah, you can leave that up. Okay. So we have our next project. Give me a moment. This is item B, 101 Santa Cruz Boulevard. This is a 5,863 square foot site located at the corner of Santa Cruz Boulevard and Shoreline Drive. It is currently developed with a 1,095 square foot single story residence with a 237 square foot attached garage. The proposal consists of a new 1,963 square foot two-story residence with a 406 square foot attached garage. A new sidewalk would be provided along Shoreline Drive. One existing pepper tree and one existing palm tree have received approval from the Parks and Recreation Commission to be removed. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer today that are required are a front setback modification to allow the new residents to encroach into the required 20-foot setback from Santa Cruz Boulevard, and an open yard modification to allow the open yard without the required minimum dimensions. Lastly, as part of this review, I'll need to make a determination that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review due to CEQA guidelines section 15301, existing facilities, and 15303, new construction of small structures. And we have Ms. Kennedy here as the staff, as project planner for this project. If you would like to go ahead and present your project. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning. So I'll start out with showing some photographs of the existing residence on 101 Santa Cruz Boulevard. So you can see here, this is the view from Shoreline Drive, the view of the existing garage, and some other views of the existing site. And then here are some neighborhood views of the area to give you a sense of where this is located. Here in the upper left is looking down Santa Cruz Boulevard from Shoreline Drive. To the right here is looking across Shoreline towards the ocean, and some other views of the neighborhood. So also some views of the existing home here on the left, and then moving up Santa Cruz Boulevard, the next residence, and then again the next. And then down below here, the two existing residences along Shoreline Drive adjacent to the project site. So I'll move along to the proposed site plan. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. So you'll see the dashed lines here, I'll point them out, are is the outline of the existing residence, and then this rectangular area shaded is the proposed residence. So you'll see that the existing residence encroaches into the setback along this western area and also encroaches into the 20-foot setback along here. This is the Santa Cruz Boulevard front setback. So this project is already non-conforming. Like I said, it encroaches into the Santa Cruz front yard setback. It does not encroach into the Shoreline Drive front setback, and it does encroach into the side yard setback here. Staff is in support of the encroachment into the 20-foot setback along Santa Cruz Boulevard because the project site's relatively narrow, as you can see. It has 2 front yards. It's a corner lot, relatively narrow, constrained lot. And the new encroachment would encroach pretty much the same amount as the existing building here along here. And the second story would encroach just a portion of it into that area as well. There is a very wide right-of-way area here, you can see. So here's the pavement and this right-of-way area. So this really feels like a much larger front setback. Here's the property line, so that gives it more distance from the road. And there are no current plans right now to widen this and create a new sidewalk here. So this existing situation should remain for a very long time. So that is the front setback. That's encroachment that staff is in support of. Let's see, I'll go to the open yard. So we have an existing open yard diagram here. The existing situation is non-conforming to open yard currently. They have more than the required, more than the 1,250 square feet, but it is not in the required areas where you have 20 by 20 dimensions. So these are the areas here that count towards open yard. So looking at the proposed, similarly, they have more than the 1,250. They have a total of 1,591 square feet of open yard area, but again, they don't have areas that meet the 20 by 20 dimension. If that were to happen, this is 20 feet. They would need to probably extend this another 30 feet in this area to meet that amount in those dimensions. So again, they provide more than the required amount, but not in the required dimension. And staff is in support of this, again, because it's a relatively narrow buildable area here. They have the 2 front yard setbacks, and it does propose more than the required amount, but not in the required dimensions, like I said. So we are in support of that. And I'll show you the elevations. The project did go to the Single Family Design Board on 2 occasions, and they were supportive of the project. I'll show you here. This is the view along Santa Cruz Boulevard. So it's a change from a 1-story to a 2-story residence, and a change from a 1-car garage to a 2-car garage. This center area is the portion that would encroach into this front setback. Like I said, Single Family Design Board was very supportive of the design. They felt like the proposed modifications were acceptable, and that this was an improvement to the neighborhood. So this is the Santa Cruz Boulevard elevation. Moving up here, this is the north elevation, so moving down further from Santa Cruz and looking back towards the ocean would be this view. Let's see. Next, this would be the view from Shoreline Drive. And you can see the 6-foot setback here, and then the right-of-way to the right. And the view from the neighbor up Shoreline Drive would have this elevation here. So also, I wanted to talk about environmental review. So staff determined this was exempt from further review, but I did want to comment that we received a comment and a letter about historic assessment. So I wanted to let you know that we did a historic assessment as part of this review. And to quote our architectural historian, this project was built in the existing building was built in 1946, but the building is not an example of a specific style and does not rise to the level that it would be considered a historic resource. So our recommendation is that staff supports the front yard modification and the open yard modification, subject to the findings that are provided in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. If I ask Mr. Oxner if you'd like to come up and add anything or walk me through any considerations, and then I'll open it up to public comment.
Good morning. I'm Tom Oxner, project architect. I really don't have anything to add. I think Ms. Kennedy did a very good job of representing the project. I'm here for any questions you might have.
Can you, is this the same set of plans that the SFDB reviewed, or has it been modified post-review? I was just curious about the second-story balcony that they were questioning, or and if you could just point that out on the elevations, which one that is, or the plans.
Yes, so this looks to be the same set of plans that SFDB reviewed. And so this is the second-story balcony. There's a wing wall here, that decorative wing wall that extends out and provides a level of privacy without becoming too obstructive. So, yeah, that was what that was referring to.
Thank you. All right. Well, how about we open it up to public comment? And if anybody's joining us via Zoom, I just ask, and you wish to comment on item 101 Santa Cruz Boulevard, please raise your hand by following the instructions on the screen. And we will call on you. And we did receive a written correspondence. If you could, Ms. Venezia, if you could share that.
Yes, thank you. We did receive one written correspondence from Andrew Giuliano, and at this time we do not have any remote public commenters, but we do have one speaker slip for Andrew Giuliano.
All right, why don't you come on up? If you can just speak into the mic, please. Can you press the button if it's not on? There we go. Kathy, there
Now
we
it's
go.
on. Test, test. All right. Good morning, Ms. Kakinda. My name is Andrew Giuliano. I'm the neighbor to the lot directly to the north of this property. My wife and I have been there for 8 years, and we purchased the home from her family, which has been on the Mesa, living there since the 1970s. And my comment letter addressed some of my concerns. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy, for addressing those as well. But I just wanted to use this time to maybe speak to something a little more fundamental about this project. In regards to the proposed development, this has been presented as a home that has to be the size that it is, that has to be bigger than everything else on the block. And it's assumption that's why we're all here today asking for modifications. I would like to point out that I disagree with that assumption. The house does not have to be the size and footprint that is currently proposed. The house does not have to encroach into this setback. The city doesn't have to grant the modification for this setback and the exception. I would like to stress that it is possible that the applicant and his client can make it smaller. In fact, it is entirely possible for this house to be designed in a way that is compatible with the rest of the neighborhood in terms of size and bulk, designed in a way that would then not encroach into the setback, designed in a way that might not even need minimum yard exemptions as well, dimensions. So rather than asking the public and city to conform to the plans, perhaps the plans can conform to the existing city laws and ordinances meant to preserve the character of our existing neighborhoods. I know that the property owner spent a lot of money on this property. And I know that when people spend a lot of money, they expect that they should be able to get their value out of what they spend. But I don't think that means that people that spend that kind of money should get special treatment to create a property and structure inconsistent with the surrounding community. Moreover, the amount that somebody pays for a property and property value should not put pressure on the city to feel like they have to meet those expectations of what somebody should get when they spend a certain amount of money on a home. And then lastly, just as a point of procedural clarification, in the event of an appeal, I know we have 10 days from today. 10 days falls on Christmas Eve, so since the city's closed from the 22nd to the 3rd, does that mean that the appeal can be submitted by January 3rd, or does it need to arrive on the 24th? So I just want to clarify that as well. And thank you for your time and consideration. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and then invite Ms. Kennedy and Mr. Oxner back to the table. So just a couple of things. I did go out. I did a site visit. I've read the SFDB minutes. Understand kind of their thinking. And just curious, maybe Mr. Oxner, if you could tell me a little bit more about your request for the front setback modification and kind of what your design thinking was with that, and again, how you were thinking about the lot and the constraints, and just how you came to this particular design.
Yes, let me see, is this working? I think it is now. Okay, yes, yes, I'm Tom Oxer. So I've actually looked at this lot with several prior prospective buyers, and I've explained to them the restraints on it over the past several years. This particular buyer was understanding of the limitations of the site, and I met with her in my office, and we discussed the disadvantages and the possible advantages of requesting a modification to the two primary concerns, which is both relates to the narrowness of the lot. The goal here was really to try to get a conforming size of a house and a house that conformed to the existing neighborhood fabric. So what we did was we looked at of voids and solids and what would be a massing that would help this corner feel like it didn't respond to the oddball lot that it is. And so the idea was then to create of 1- and 2-story masses that created a larger volume at the corner. So our goal was to try to create the residential activity to the corner of Santa Cruz and Shoreline, which by creating an indentation there, creating a 1-story mass that projects out towards Santa Cruz. Really one of the few things this site has going for it in terms of its configuration relates to the space in front of Santa Cruz and the narrowness of the lot. So in requesting the primary need for the front yard, well, the only need for the setback would be in the direction of that space, which already, as Ms. Kennedy pointed out, has that additional area between the edge of Santa Cruz and the property line. We checked with transportation, and we were kind of curious to see if they had any plans for and what kind of development they might do in terms of sidewalk between the edge of the paving and the property line on Santa Cruz, and they really didn't have anything in mind, and there's reason to suspect that that area will remain some kind of a green belt in the long term, definitely in the short term. So really the goal here was to really try to create a house that looked like it wasn't the response to a very difficult, narrow lot. Now we do have, I'd like to point out an exhibit here on the plans that kind of shows what a conforming mass might look like on that site. Kathleen, if you could.
If you two need to switch, if it's
maybe
easier,
that-
like it's hard to.
So of course, we always look at what a conforming situation would look like. So a conforming situation where we would not require modification, or at least significant modifications. Let me see if I can find it. I saw it earlier in the, there we go. So this diagram here, you see that that long box, to get the just the FAR that would be commensurate to the size of the lot, the volume would fit into something like that. So the obvious solution for someone who's buying this property would be to try to take a rectangular box like that and make it look good. So our goal was to really take the same volume, and this is kind of like form-based design that a lot of communities do, where they just look at the intent of what the zoning is and try to meet that intent, but in a way that's better suited to the environment. So we thought by pushing and pulling and by setting the massing back from shoreline and creating that indentation and orienting the floor plan of the house to the corner, shoreline has really become a pedestrian thoroughfare, and there's a lot of neighborhood interaction there. So we designed the house to kind of have the public space on the first level out in that area. But, and then, of course, to maintain the garage in its current location, it seems to work well back from shoreline. That's been successful. And to step down the massing to the back to the north of the property and respect that space back there. But so that's kind of the evolution of the development of the site.
Thank you. And Ms. Kennedy or Mr. Oxener, just wondering, in your conversations or when this project was routed to transportation, did they have any expectations of how that the public right-of-way that kind of appears to be part of the property, how that, like, what the expectation is, or if there's any direction there? I guess one thing, a caveat, like, I understand that there's no, like, immediate proposal there's no proposal to put in sidewalks at any point in time
That's correct.
soon.
We checked to see if there was anything in the near future, and there isn't. There's
Okay.
no plan.
But did they say anything else about kind of what would be expected, or in terms of that area, or kind of how it
Not-
needs to operate in any way?
Not really, no. But they did talk about the driveway length, that it could be a little bit shorter, given that extra dimension in the front. So it's, instead of 20 feet, I think it's 18 plus a little bit. They did look at that. But they didn't look at the right-of-way and have any concerns about it. I mean, it will be maintained the way it is.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions I have right now. So again, I did go out on site. It's interesting, this Santa Cruz is interesting because it doesn't have sidewalks and it's very narrow. And I think this is a unique site because, one, it as a lot is extremely narrow, and so it's tough to design. And I just want to point out your comment that, like, I knew this house kind of before the project came to be, because it's funky. Like, you recognize it. It doesn't look similar, but again, just wanting to clarify as part of our CEQA review process that the architectural historian did have a chance to review it, and although it's a little unique, but doesn't necessarily have a particular style or like how it would fit in. So I'm confident with that analysis and the review. With the one thing that I appreciate is that the existing residence is non-conforming to the interior setback, so you're actually making it more conforming. But what that means is it's pulling it out to the massing and encroaching into that front setback. But I do think that it's fairly modest, and again, with the additional kind of perceived buffer of the public right-of-way, it's not as extreme. So I can go ahead and approve the front setback modification, and just for the commenters' input. Whenever we review projects, I'm not thinking of cost. You know, that's not necessarily part of my purview, or there's no kind of implication for, there's no expectation that anybody should receive an approval of anything just because they ask. And so, but I do believe that this is a site that's very constrained, given the narrowness of the lot and the two front setbacks. So it makes it really difficult to find any kind of conforming non-conforming situation. So I can approve the front setback modification to say that it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the site. And that also follows the single-family design board's review and their considerations for the appropriateness of the design of the modification. And again, this has two front setbacks. Generally, the way that, can you go back to the site plan, Mr. Oxner?
Yes. I'm going to switch with you.
Or I'm sorry, the elevation, the Santa Cruz elevation.
I can explain that quickly. Okay.
So the single-family design board looks at the mass, bulk, and the scale of the project, and that's really their purview. I'm looking at the modification, but again, can kind of appreciate the attempts of kind of pulling the massing forward and back to kind of make it that it's not just a wall, like one straight wall coming as part of the front setback modification. So I appreciate the design and how it's considerate for the street, and again, creating a buffer, but not necessarily being a stark contrast if you're walking by. And then in terms of the open yard modification, similarly, I think it's appropriate. You've got we have standard sizes to kind of make sure that development proposes certain things, but I think you still have the area further north, which doesn't necessarily meet the size requirements. But then you've also created this open yard experience at the corner of Santa Cruz and Shoreline that, again, meets the intention of the open yard and creating a space for outdoor enjoyment, light, and so, again, I believe that the open yard modification is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on a lot, and I agree with staff's opinion on the matter and the findings as is listed in the report. And that also goes for the CEQA exemptions that I also find that the project is exempt based on staff's findings listed in the report. We'll go back to the appeal process. We do have a 10-day appeal period within 10 calendar days. Ms. Kennedy and I can determine what is acceptable, because when something falls on a holiday or something, generally we wait till the next business day that we're open. So if there is a question out there, we'll make sure that it's clear of what the deadline is. If you're interested. But again, my decision can be appealed at any point within that 10-day calendar time period, and it could also be pulled by any member of the Planning Commission. Again, my purview today is just the two modifications and the secret review. The single-family design board is looking at the design aesthetics, the mass, the bulk, the scale. And so this project, as soon as it moves forward, the next step will be for it to go back to the single-family design board to request project design approval. And again, that is the approval of the single-family design board, where they will look at it and make sure that they're comfortable with that mass, bulk, and scale. So that is another appeal. As part of that decision, that similarly has an appeal period as well. So once they're able to make that finding, I only say that because based on what your interest might be, if there's a more appropriate place that you want to review your case. So thank you, Mr. Oxter, Ms. Kennedy, and that concludes our meeting for December 14th. So I'm going to adjourn it.